Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the North American Logistics Tech Summit. I'm Ryan Schreiber. I'm the Director of Engagement at Carrier Direct, and I'm also the host of Inside the Founder Studio podcast. And today I'm joined for a fireside chat here by Mustafa Azizi, founder and CEO of ZUUM. Thanks a lot for joining me today, Mustafa.
Hey, nice to be welcome to your show. I appreciate it. And just let me level set here before we begin. Every one of these FreightWave events I've done, everybody calls me Mustafa. Mo is an option if it's easier for you guys.
All right, good. I'll go with Mo from here. I like that. Mo, we're gonna a lot of attention is paid to like large companies and what they're doing with technology. Or companies with deep pockets, right? The Convoys of the world, the Ubers of the world, and then the Redwoods and the and those folks, and kind of like what they're spending and how they're attacking technology. But I want to talk about with you kind of the small and medium-sized brokers and intermediaries. And over the last several years, kind of a question that I regularly get is, do I think small guys are going away? So I want to kind of start there. Like I get this question, do I think small brokers and medium-sized brokers are going to go away with this technology revolution? And I always kind of reply back that they don't have to go away. It's a little bit of kind of a devil's choice there. What excites me today is that there really are kind of a plethora of options for these small and mid-sized intermediaries to inject software in their business and remain competitive. So the first thing I'd throw out there that I'd love to hear your take on is, I'd imagine you agree that these folks aren't going away anytime soon anyway. What do you see kind of as a key driver to their competitiveness? And what should intermediaries maybe focus on over the next few years to kind of try and remain competitive against some of these larger players as they adopt big technology suites?
Yeah, well, obviously, number one, if you want to be competing with the big guys or even feel as you're competing with the big guys, you want to focus on your interactions with carriers and making sure that they want to use your company over and over again and pay better than the other guys if you can, and find those customers that help you enable them. I mean, since we're a tech company, I could say, you know what, focus only on technology and digitizing and catching up with the big guys. But ultimately, I think the most important part is to come up with a really trusted, good base of carriers that you can rely on when you get that right customer to scale your brokerage.
That's such a great point. I think what you just intimated there at the end there about kind of being a technology company and this concept of like digitize everything, a big pushback around technology, right, in the adoption of technology in our industry, and particularly in that mid-market and lower intermediaries is, well, this is a relationship business and the relationship isn't going anywhere. And there's almost a concept of like, it's technology or relationship and that those are at odds. And what you just kind of mentioned there is, hey, let's focus on digitizing the transaction. It's not digitizing the relationship. That doesn't necessarily go anywhere. And to your point, like focus on interactions with carriers. I love that point, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, like as an intermediary, all you sell is capacity. All you're reselling is capacity. So it's interactions. And then to your point about paying better, a big trend that we're tracking and that we're working with on with our customers is how do they lower their cost to serve, right? And so there's a lot of carriers look at brokers and a lot of shippers look at brokers and say, they're so expensive, right? They're making 15% margin. That's a ton of money. It's so expensive. But when you look at the cost it takes to actually serve a shipment and how much a broker actually ends up making to the bottom line, it's not that much, right? If the average margin on a shipment is about $150, maybe it's more today given the capacity environment, but $150, $175, $130 plus of that is tied up in cost of service. And so, one of the things that I'm looking at to answer my own question here that people should focus on over the next few years are tools that allow them to procure capacity better and faster and smarter, right? That lowers their cost to serve so they have free cash to pay better, right? So you can spend less, spend less and still make as much money or more money as you were making before. How does that strike you? I mean, do you see something similar?
I mean, we're unique because we have a digital freight brokerage, but we're also the first company to give our software to other brokers. So yeah, that resonates really deep with us because we're always focused on, number one, bringing a lower cost of doing that transaction for ourselves, but also leveraging that to our partners that want to use our software. To kind of tap on that first question you asked about brokers in the industry. So the thing is, according to all the money that's in the industry, there's more and more new brokers opening up every day. And our industry is always going to be somewhat pretty fragmented. And you might want to even say that fragmentation is not a bad thing because it sparks competitiveness and services people long run. But I do think there is a value that the other day I was talking to a carrier and they're like, hey, it's really cool how you onboarded me. It was slick. And it kind of left this feeling that I'm dealing with somebody good. So if you can find the way as a small or medium-sized brokerage to really look more reputable to those carriers that are really have a lot of brokers to choose from and make their lives easier, then it's going to help you win that relationship longer term as well.
It's super great point there about that onboarding experience. I recently wrote an op-ed for that's on FreightWaves right now. Go ahead and check it out. I need those clicks, everybody. But it was all about Redwood's new logistics platform as a service. And the point that I was making is that it's an example of sort of bringing that customer-centric design element to freight, right? Which is something that's been missing over time. And so to your point about that onboarding experience that you just had with that customer, or excuse me, with that carrier, how it was slick, it removed friction from that transaction. It had that customer-centric element of it. I'm sure you still got everything that you needed from the carrier, but it left them with a better experience of what it might be like to work with that company. And that's all about that customer-centric design. So I love that point about how that's bringing into the industry every opportunity you have to remove those friction points. Fragmentation is a huge thing for our business. I mean, JP Hampstead and I were having a conversation about this maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe more now, but about how, fragmentation is probably going to persist, right? Because there are probably 250 large shippers in this country that really kind of drive the freight market, right? And for those companies, fragmentation is a good thing. So that's probably not going anywhere. I want to let's kind of talk about, you mentioned how your company, you sell software to other folks, and you also have a digital freight brokerage. I think the key to mid-sized intermediaries, smaller intermediaries, really being able to persist in the future and thrive in the future is this adoption, right? And the concept of actually getting to adopt the technology. But then I see companies constantly struggling with where to start when it comes to technology, because there's a ton. Now, it used to be you have a TMS, and maybe you had DAT, and you had Truck Stop, and you had RMIS. You maybe you had these little like pieces here and there. Now there's a ton. There's a bunch of opportunities. Do you see the same thing about brokers maybe struggling with that? And what do you think what's the biggest opportunity that's maybe easy for folks to focus on from an adoption perspective, see some quick wins, and really start to change the culture of their business when it comes to technology?
Yeah, so when we look at the medium to small size broker, there's really like 3 flavors, right? There's that brokerage that has like over 50 employees. There's that brokerage between 10 and 50, and then there's that brokerage that's less than 10. And you could even take this conversation to the truckers as well, because a lot of them have asset-based brokerages, and it's all starting to overlap a little bit here and there. So the reality for me is, when you're looking at your software landscape and you've made that executive decision that we need to be digitally transformed, number one, you could build. That's going to be really expensive, and it might be a rabbit hole down the line, because even the companies that are traditional brokers that spend hundreds of millions of dollars don't have a fifth of the product of true Silicon Valley-based brokers. And then you're going to have to maintain that all the years. Number two, you could buy it, right? But the problem is the only people that you can buy from are legacy TMS providers that have a new cloud-based platform that is basically putting lipstick on a pig. And that was the old architecture. But then the problem with those guys is they have huge upfront expenses and all these bells and whistles and long onboarding. And then the third way is like if you buy like some smaller, cloud-based software, but that might not just do what you need to do in a business. With us, we have built a complete digital brokerage suite, which is actually inexpensive. That could be here's the key, rolled out in 5 days with all of the platforms interconnected.
That's definitely, you know, what you're describing there on that third approach is a hybrid approach, right? And I think that's one of the things that we talk a lot about with our clients. Historically, in transportation, I don't know, actually not just transportation, historically with software, to your point about that architecture, you kind of had to build everything to have some sort of competitive advantage. And as an industry, we are sort of struggling to get away from that mentality of if I don't have proprietary tech, I can't be competitive. Really, even with our largest customers, they're taking that hybrid buy build approach, right? They're going to buy the things that are table stakes, like tracking, and they're going to build what differentiates them from the market right now. And I think that's a great point. And certainly to your comment about the architecture and moving things to the cloud, you need software that plays nicely with others, right? Like you have to make decisions about your core software and also the ancillary software products that you buy or build and how they're going to interact with each other and play with each other. I think that's certainly what we're seeing as well.
You know what's the big hang up we have is people spend a lot of money on the old stuff they have, so they have a hard time letting it go. And they use that as an excuse not to invest in the new stuff, even though it doesn't do the job.
Sunk cost fallacy, man. It's yeah.
It's like, how do you overcome the paradigm in their minds? The second thing with our software is we're a tech company that's always using it for ourselves. So every time we have a new update weekly, they get that for free. So in 5 years, you wouldn't have to update it. The only contradiction that comes to ZUUM that they sit in their mind, they're like, well, you're a broker too, and you're giving me a software. I don't know if I trust a race car driver building me a race car. And I'm like, yeah, you could look at the glass half full or half empty. We have these 3 things that mitigate your risk in terms of your data being protected. We could even build it on another architecture. But ultimately, it's really consider the alternatives, right? So
I think for your point about the 50 and under sized brokers, and I think even when you talk about mid-market, you can go up to, 150 million in revenue or so. But really those folks in the 50 and under range, one of the problems that I see a lot of times is they're trying to do too much with technology. Like I get messages sometimes from folks who say like, hey, I'm under $10 million in revenue, but what do you think about I should be adopting from an optimization software perspective? And I'm like, well, do you have customers who are asking you for optimization of their supply chain? No, but just in case. And it's like, do you have that much money? And so I think that your point is kind of well made is, look, I'm not here to advocate for people buying ZUUM. Like, I don't necessarily know anything about your product, but what I do think is true is that folks need to get away from the sunk cost fallacy of like, this is what I did. I need to do something today that's going to stay with me for the rest of time. Like, where are you today? What do you need today to be competitive and to subsist? And then also, like, what's close at hand? Like, what's something that you can do that gives you a competitive advantage to get to that next phase of growth, right? If you're a $10 million broker and you're thinking about how to compete with C.H. Robinson, like, you're thinking about the wrong stuff, man. Like, you need to think how do I get from 10 million to 20 million to 50 million to 100 million? Like, you need to be looking at the next stepstones and constantly be revisiting that, right? Because that's the point about the sunk cost fallacy. Constantly be revisiting that because it's a moving target. And you need to be making the plans for the next phase. I kind of, you need to be blocking and tackling, but you also need to be working on what's that next, game design that's really gonna help with you.
It's really easy to overcome the sunk cost fallacy when you're under 100 million than when you're above 100 million. So the sooner you kind of like take that paradigm out, the faster it'll help you out.
Totally. One of the other questions I get a lot of times, and I'd love your take on it as a software company as well, is how quickly folks need to be thinking about making some of these changes in their business. What do you see as the next 5 years that people really need to invest in, and how quickly do you think those things are going to, kind of change?
Well, from a broker perspective, I think the most important thing to invest in as a small and medium-sized broker is people, because you're not going to get anywhere without the right people on the bus. But ultimately, it would be really nice because a lot of the customers are used to and the carriers are used to playing with people with really good platforms that are easy to adopt in terms of a UI perspective, to adopt that if it's affordable. But like you said, man, don't take on bites that you don't need to early in the game. If your business is like in a way that it's not going to go out of business today, just consider your options, weigh out the different options.
Is there one workflow issue that you think people should look at? Like pricing? You talked about capacity earlier. Like, what about capacity do you think people should look for? I personally think I'd bring up pricing and capacity. Personally, I think pricing is a big one. That is changing dramatically, right? I mean, it's not just sort of DAT rate view anymore. You have other options, Green Screen's AI or Sonar's pricing product, whatever. I think that those are something you should really look at. Being a broker has always been a speed of information game. And as we see these kind of spikes and these market swings becoming more dramatic and quicker, the speed of information is really important, which is why I think, pricing is one that I would look at. Capacity management is another one, right? And so tools like FreightFriend or Parade AI are big ones that I look for in terms of helping companies manage capacity and scale the liquidity in their carrier network, which is really what you sell as a broker. So are there other things like that you guys are looking at and that you're looking at as a big opportunity space for folks? If you're in that small to mid-size range, it's going to help you get to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, with our tool, we've integrated to all those guys you've mentioned because we don't want to be like the end all to everybody's needs, right? We want to build more of a Google-like share platform that we can all work together. The thing that mid-sized brokers will look in the future in the next 5 years is alone they might not have a lot of buying power, and alone they might be weak, or somebody big might try to swallow them up. If you noticed, all the big brokers are trying to swallow up all the medium-sized brokers right now. But in a way, like if you look at the small guy that had his apartment that started to rent it out, the biggest thing that ever happened for those guys was a platform like Airbnb, because now Airbnb as a whole brought together all the medium guys to be competitive versus like the Orbitz and Travelocity. That's really our thesis, is like how can we get people working towards synergy, like 1 + 1 = 3. Ask not what you can do for yourself, but what you can do for your community.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I appreciate you sharing some of this time with me, Mustafa. I think we're at the just up against it. So if people want to reach out to you or learn more, where can they find you?
Yeah, they could always go to my website, bigkahuna.com. No, I'm just kidding. It's ZUUMapp.com, ZUUMAPP.com. Go click the little broker tab on the top and get ready to be blown away, or find me on LinkedIn, Mustafa Azizi.
Mustafa, thanks again. I really enjoyed this conversation. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm Ryan Schreiber. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at _userprime. And definitely check out more from the FreightWaves North America Logistics Tech Summit. And everybody have a great day.
Peace out.